Is Blake Griffin in the midst of the greatest season in OU basketball history? From the Dodge Sports Desk, I'm Mike Sherman, and this is OU Basketball with John Helsley. On News OK Saturday, Barry Trammell's going to take a look at this, and he's going to look at where Blake Griffin ranks on OU's Mount Rushmore of basketball talent. Right now, it's got to be a two-man mountain. Alvin Adams, Wayman Tisdale. Where does Blake go, John?
I think Blake fits right in there in that next tier. He's got a lot of season left and a lot of things he can do and accomplish. If he can maybe take this team to a Final Four, do some things like that. They're 18-1 right now. If they continue to make a run like that, maybe he can move up in there. I think it would take a third season, really, for Blake to really firmly push himself up, past or even right there with those two guys.
What about his season, though? I mean, and the force that he's become. Clearly, and we'll talk about what happened Wednesday in Norman against Nebraska. But in the second half of that game, it really just seemed like he took it over, said, we're not losing this game. Might not be our best performances, but I'm willing us to victory. Doesn't that really put him in the conversation?
Yeah, I think it does. And he's that type of a presence on this team. Players look to him to be that guy. The interesting thing about Blake is a lot of times in first halves, he tries to get everybody else involved. And, I think he was doing some of that last night. And when it appears that time in a game where, hey, I better be the star, he usually comes through and becomes that player.
This is a guy that's really grown up in front of the eyes and before the lens of the basketball fan in Oklahoma. Now Sports Illustrated comes this week with a takeout feature on Blake Griffin. What'd you think about that story?
I liked it. It was a decent piece. A lot of that stuff we've had, and I'm sure they got in the archives or whatever, and it kind of traces them, basically from childhood up, and we've done a lot of stories on Blake, so a lot of that stuff wasn't new to us, but I thought it was pretty well done, and if anything, it introduces him nationally, and maybe helps then also when we get down close to National Player of the Year type conversations, maybe some different media around the country will have seen it as well.
Interesting. That comes a couple weeks after they sort of did a big takeout piece on James Harden, Arizona State shooting guard. So they're sort of going through more or less the national Super Five, and they got to Blake. Now, there's a big audience out there that wants to know, not just in Oklahoma, about whether he's going to go to the NBA. Is it a foregone conclusion in your mind that Blake goes to the NBA after this season?
Yeah, I think it is. One, Taylor will have, finished up and be gone. I think Blake will probably be able to tell you that he's done the things he wanted to do as far as improving his game. He's got a little bit of a jump shot now. He's taking some threes.
Hitting his free throws.
He's taking the ball on the break. I don't know how much another season would do for him as far as things that he couldn't do in the NBA.
Okay. Speaking of foregone conclusions, John, last week in Sports Monday in the OU Insider, you wrote that keeping Jeff Capel in Norman is not a foregone conclusion. Which programs out there could be on the prowl?
Well, right now you've got Arizona already playing with an interim coach. That's a job that's open. You hear some different names there. There's talk that maybe Izzo is interested in that. Jamie Dixon, perhaps. I would think Jeff Capel would be a guy they would have to look at. Maryland is a job right now. Longtime coach, guy who's been successful there, but they've been in a slump the last few years.
Lost at home to Morgan State.
Never a good thing. There's talk that maybe this will be Gary Williams' final year. So that's a job that you could see Jeff Capel fitting in very, very easily. The guy can recruit. It's a fertile ground for players. And then there's always going to be some others that pop open. So I think Jeff would be very attractive to people.
What can OU do about it? In an effort to keep him?
Some things that I think that would have to be in consideration is, one, the economy right now. How much money does someone have to spend? We're seeing it in sports everywhere. So, I don't know that another school would be able to necessarily blow him away money-wise. Somebody make a good run at him. So money would be a factor. OU would have to step that up. He's at $1.05 million right now. It's not bad. Guys out there making a lot more than that. So they'd have to kick up the money. The other thing, and it's something I alluded to the other day, you can win at Oklahoma. You can win big. You can recruit here. Oklahoma and Texas alone can put enough players on the roster to win with. And it's not the competition of, say, an ACC or Big East or some of the big power conferences. You can win the Big 12 championship here and go and do some things. So I think there are things to consider.
What's been the reaction since you wrote that article on Monday? I heard some things on the radio like, hey, the timing's not good, this team's having a great. Is this kind of talk a distraction to the team?
I don't think so. I mean, the team's pretty much focused in on what it wants to do. That's the way players are. They see a great opportunity to go out and win. And, hey, they're short-timers anyway. I mean, they're on the short schedule anyway, whether it's early to the NBA or even if you stay the full go. We're talking 4 years. And you know what? Jeff went through this last year. Last spring, went through the South Carolina talks, and it hasn't really affected him this year. I'm not sure I'm a big believer in the distraction theories out there.
Okay, John, back on the court. And in the past, Austin Johnson's blown a little hot and cold for the Sooners, but not recently. Another good performance last night. Has the Sooner point guard turned a corner?
I think he has. And one of the things I think that's helped him is the talent around him is so much better. He was on teams the last few years where the talent was spotty. And now you've got another guard in Willie Warren. You've got Tony Crocker playing, still a little bit hot and cold, but he's a threat that has to be, taken care of by the other team. I think he's healthier than he's been at OU. I think all those things are factoring in. And, I think he's just a confident player right now, maybe because of those other things, but I think his confidence is as high as it's ever been. Okay,
back to Wednesday night against Nebraska. I mean, you looked at that score and you thought, what's going on here? What happened in the first half?
Well, it looked immediately like they were a little disinterested, and that can happen with when you're on a good roll. You finally get home. You look at Nebraska, and they got 4 guards. They just don't overwhelm you. Jeff Capel tried to warn us a little bit. He said these guys will play hard on defense. They'll attack you, and they won't ever give up. And we kind of saw that in them last night. And I think that bothered Oklahoma a little bit in that they played so hard, collapsing on Blake, and then when he would go to kick it out, they were quick enough to get out on shooters. And so I think that was kind of a little bit of an underappreciated thing about this Nebraska team. They've got 12 wins. They're not a terrible team. And I think, combined with the fact that the Sooners just, weren't really into the game until the second half. Okay, up next for the Sooners, Saturday at home against Baylor, and then Monday in Stillwater. Which is a tougher test? I think the game in Stillwater is a tougher test. One, I think the crowd up there will be probably as good as it's been all season. Baylor's a team that's going to play 4 guards, a little bit like Nebraska did, but they don't play any defense. They just want to get out and shoot it. And I think that'll play into the Sooners' hands. Game being in Norman, I think it'll be a game that they win comfortably. Okay, thanks, John. That's all for now, but you can follow all things Sooner basketball with the best coverage team anywhere, every day at News OK, and every morning in the Oklahoman.